participants online. Just give me about 10 seconds to start the stream, and then you can start. Does that sound good?
That's great. Thanks, Aaron.
We're live now.
Good morning. Okay, we'll get to go. Good morning, and thank you for joining us for our bi-weekly media conference. I'm joined today by Inspector Shannon and Chief Parr. We'll start off with the shout out to our paramedics. This is Paramedics Services Week, and certainly during this COVID crisis, we want to make sure that we give a big shout out and recognize the incredible work that our paramedics do day in, day out in these trying circumstances. It's also wonderful to note that the Huron Street mural has now been completed. Encourage everyone to get down and enjoy it. The artists Lily Finley, Ruth Hurdle, Sam Nellix, Rob Saley, and Blaze Wairadharma, I think it is, Wairadharma, have all done incredible jobs beautifying the hoarding down on Huron Street. So I encourage everyone to go down and admire it when you're out and about. The town of Collingwood, as you know, has been rehabilitating Sunset Point Park. The park remains closed, and we have had to do considerable remediation because of the high water levels this year. They have actually gone up, I'm told, approximately 7 inches. The water level has increased by 7 inches since the beginning of March. So we are now very much into record territory, and it is challenging for our shoreline. And so we would ask that people stay away from Sunset Park while the work is ongoing. We have to remove storm debris, rehabilitate the shoreline, and there are sections of the trail that have been compromised or completely undermined. So we need people to stay out of the park while we are completing that work. We are ahead of schedule, and we're anticipating that the work will be completed sometime next week. And the park will then open probably within 4 or 5 days of the completion of the work. There will be portions of the park that are being reseeded. And so you will not be able to go into those areas when the park has reopened. And we need people to respect that, not for 2 reasons, really. And I will get into the second later. The first is obviously that we're doing the work now. It's not safe to be in the park. And the second is that we have our COVID issue and we need to respect social distancing. So when the park does reopen, we'll be asking people to continue to respect the fact that we are under a COVID crisis. This is a disease that's serious and potentially fatal. And we have been working extremely well in our community to make sure that we flatten the curve. And it would be very unfortunate to to undo all that right now when we are in the process of trying to reopen our economy and other facilities. So please respect the fact that the park is closed. It will hopefully be reopened within a week, but for now it is closed while the work is ongoing, and the work has been very successful, and so we're looking forward to getting the park open again so that we can all enjoy it. The trail is open. It is rerouted, so it does not go into the park near the water. It goes along the roadway. So if you're out on the trails, you can still continue to use the trails, but do not go into the park, please. We have heard through the province that starting May 19th, many businesses have been able to reopen. And this is part of the stage 2 reopening, the phased approach that the Premier has spoken about. And with the recent provincial announcements, the town has opened the boat launch, dog parks, tennis courts, soccer fields, baseball diamonds, pickleball courts are all open for individual use. More recently, the skate park and basketball courts were opened. But again, we are asking that these be individual uses, that people need to understand that we have to respect social distancing. That's a distance of 6 feet. And we encourage people to wear cloth masks if you are in situations when you cannot respect that social distancing. So those facilities are open for individual use. We cannot have groups of bigger than 5. And as well, the washroom facilities at these venues are not open. So you'll need to take that into account if you're planning to use them. And We have heard over the last week from our local health official, Dr. Chuck Gardner, as well as our national chief health officer, Dr. Tam, that since May 19, when we did start to reopen businesses and relax some of the social restrictions and reopen some facilities, there have been bump ups in our infection rates. And so we need to be very careful that we continue to respect the social distancing and practices in place. So lots of hand washing, using hand sanitizer, maintaining a social distance of 6 feet at all times, and coughing into your sleeve. And if you are going out and you will be in situations where you may not be able to maintain 6 foot distance, then I encourage you to wear a cloth face mask. The cloth face mask is to protect those around you. It is not to protect yourself. And so because you are wearing a face mask, we should not assume that we are have an extra layer of protection. Really, the face mask is a courtesy to those around us to protect others in case we're carrying the virus. And so we've seen the Dr. Tam recommend and encourage the use of face masks. So I'm encouraging our residents, if you are going out in public, if you will be shopping, if you'll be waiting in line, if you'll be in spaces where you may not be able to maintain the safe social distancing, then I encourage everyone to wear a cloth mask to protect those around you. And we need to work together cooperatively and collaboratively to make sure that as we start to restart our economy and get out and about and get back into public spaces, that we respect and work cooperatively and collaboratively to make sure that we flatten the curve of the infection so that we can continue to start to establish a new normal. And so we will be in this situation probably for the next 12 months. And we need to work together cooperatively to make sure that that we go in the right direction and that we don't slide backwards and have to go into a lockdown again. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Inspector Shannon and encourage everyone to have a safe weekend and continue to respect social safe distancing. Thank you.
Your Worship. So this past week, we've certainly seen an increase in volume of calls. We experienced 280 calls for service between Collingwood and the town of Blue Mountains this past week. And we've certainly seen an increase in traffic volume. For everyone's awareness, our officers are now engaging in vehicle stops with the use of PPE. So expect that if you are out there and operating aggressively, you can expect to be the recipient of some enforcement by our officers. We continue to experience calls for service at Heritage Park and Sunset Park. And again, much like His Worship requested, I'm asking the public to please show respect for our officers and that includes our uniformed officers and by law. You're jeopardizing their health by not respecting the social distancing. And we've experienced this past week large groups gathering in both of these locations and repeated calls for service where officers are having to go and engage to, again, explain there should be no gatherings of more than 5 people. And they're just simply not respecting the 2-meter distance that is expected. So please, the pandemic is not done, and I need my officers safe to handle the more serious calls that come in and the emergent calls. So again, folks, please continue to be diligent and respect the emergency orders that are in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I'll pass it over now to Chief Parr.
Thank you, Your Worship. Same as your earlier words for Paramedic Week to celebrate and thank the paramedics of Simcoe County that represent the town of Collingwood. We have agreements with them and work with them and are trained by them. So it's something that we appreciate daily with working with paramedic services, and I also appreciate what they offer the town. Second thing, you're going to see us more in the community starting next week. We have some programs that we're doing part of our recovery plan that have been put off. We're going to be doing our lockbox inspections on businesses and buildings. Prevention activities are stepping up, more businesses opening, more requirements are for what are required in the buildings for alarms, maintenance, and other systems in the building. So we're checking on that to make sure that people occupying or people that visit these businesses are safe. The other thing that you'll see is we have certain requirements for training, and we've been putting them off till now, but now the weather and what we have to submit to the Ministry of Labor, we have to get those in. So you could see trucks out flowing water or doing our pump tests on our trucks. So please be aware, and it's nice to come look at the trucks, but we still have to maintain the physical distancing requirements under the Emergency Act. And finally, I'd just like to thank the community. We've had almost zero complaints when it comes for burning. People are following the bylaw and doing it respectfully with their neighbors, and that's the whole intent of the bylaw. And with the long weekend that passed, we had zero calls for service for fireworks complaints or issues or incidents involving fireworks. So again, I'd like to thank the community for thinking of the safety of everybody at that time. And that's good. That's all, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ross. And with that, we'll open it to questions.
Hi guys, it's Ian Adams from The Connection. I just wanted to follow up with Mary with regard to officers responding to some of these gatherings in the park. Just the one question I have the officers been experiencing sort of any kind of aggressiveness from people they're trying to talk to, or have people been pretty reasonable about?
Yeah, no, the general position has been, we've adopted an educational approach, and for the most part, we're seeing people compliant and moving on when directed to do so. I can't speak for bylaw because most of the times they are the first point of contact. We did experience a group out of Toronto that were attempting to camp this past weekend down at Sunset Point, and they were somewhat upset when they were directed to move on, as the bylaw does not permit overnight camping down at Sunset Point. But otherwise, the officer's experience has been compliance when directed to move on.
And there was also an issue, I guess, behind Millennium Park as well. You mentioned Heritage Park and Sunset Point, but I guess there's been issues behind the grain elevators as well.
Yes. Yep. So officers are out. We're directing some focus patrols in those areas. And our officers are hoping that more of a presence will deter any further problems.
Any other questions or follow-up questions, Ian?
Well, I guess the one thing with regard to bylaw, and now that some businesses can reopen to some extent, I guess if they have the, front door onto a main street kind of thing, are bylaw officers doing any sort of follow-up inspections to make sure that there's a compliance to that?
I would say the answer to that is yes. I have personally been contacted by some businesses to get clarity on if they're allowed to be open, and I know that the bylaw has been out to answer some of those responses and work with our local business community to make sure that they can open or whether they're able to open. So I am aware of a couple of instances, and I'm sure there's been more questions coming forward since the Tuesday, May 19 reopening deadline.
Hi, it's Erica from Collingwood today. Inspector Shannon, you were speaking briefly before the conference started, and you were kind of expressing some frustration at still seeing people congregating and still having to tell people not to gather and to stay apart. I just wondered, like, how are you feeling as an inspector, as someone who is responsible for the officers responding to that you're still seeing people congregating?
I think, Erica, that it's just, people have been isolated, and I can certainly attest to the heat this past week. Certainly, a lot of people were looking to get out into the water. And I think it's just not a point in time where we can really let slip all the hard work that we've done to flatten the curve. We certainly don't want to see a spike in a second wave. It's very much still there's infections that still exist in the community, and I think we just really need to be diligent at this time. And I know it's been a long haul, and with the nicer weather, everyone wants to be out, and certainly there is the opportunity to be outdoors, but we just really need to be cognizant of the distancing and contemplate wearing the masks to protect others, because this by no means is over with. It's still ongoing, and I think we all need to practice what the health unit recommends to us to keep us all safe.
And I think, Erica, from my perspective, from the municipality's perspective, there's a great deal of frustration that we have the numbers of people that we do in Sunset Point. The park has been closed. There's large machinery there. There's heavy equipment and boulders. Parts of the trail have been undermined, and there's debris across the park, which we're continuing to work on. So it's frustrating to hear that not only are there large crowds of people there, but someone's trying to camp there. So on top of the fact that even if the park were open, you wouldn't be allowed to do that, the park is closed. So we need our residents and any people that are visiting town to understand that because it's a liability for the municipality if someone gets hurt there when the park is closed.
Have either the town or police considered increased security, sort of more round the clock at these places, or is the issue not big enough to warrant that?
Well, I will start off and then pass it over to Inspector Shannon. The situation's evolving. The weather is changing. I would say we've had very good compliance up until this point. And for the reasons Mary has expressed, it is getting, I think, a little more difficult. We are trying to reopen, but we're trying to do that safely and responsibly. So if we continue to have problems, the park will be open shortly in another week to 10 days. But if things continue that way, then I think we will certainly look at increased measures to combat that. With that said, I'll pass it to Mary.
Yeah. Certainly, Erica. I think there's strategies that we can employ. When you look at some of the parks that are reopening in Toronto, and the concept of creating circles to kind of heighten that awareness for people that are out. I think those are all great strategies. And I think what we saw this past week was the frustration of people who have been cooped up for an extended period of time and extremely warm weather, and just wanting to get out and enjoy the historical part of Collingwood that has been such an appeal to all of its residents. So I think, as we see people cooperate when directed to move on, and heightening that awareness that, although we've moved the barricades that were restricting parking down at the waterfront, the park is in fact still closed. And you know, we measure things as they arise. We're very closely engaged and having regular discussions with bylaw to measure our approach on enforcement. And I think as we see more venues reopen, we'll have to reevaluate those as they occur and have the discussions with the municipal bylaw and staff at the town to assess what the next steps will be as far as enforcement or strategies to mitigate some of this.
Have there been any fines laid from police or bylaw?
I can't speak for bylaw. We've done some enforcement for LLA trespass, but we have not laid under the Emergency Measures and Civil Protection Act.
And I'm not able to answer that, Erica, so I'd have to check with bylaw, and I will ask Greg to look into that.
Okay, I just had one question for Chief Parr. Does the fire department have any new special sort of inspection roles that they're working with the health unit on as you go into these businesses and you're working on fire prevention? Is there anything added?
Erica, no, there isn't. We still, when we go in, we look at cleanliness, and that's part of the health unit's requirements. So if we see something, we have a mandate to report to the health unit. So we still watch that. So just because it was restaurants were restricted to curbside pickup or home delivery, we're still enforcing the fire code and still have the right to enforce the fire code with to do with that. And part of that is the health unit requirements that we see at the time. So nothing new yet handed down to us. I hope not. They're busy enough with that, but the system seems to work, and I'm pleased to say that we haven't had an issue with any of the businesses that maintained or stayed open during the initial part of COVID's up to now.
I wonder, Ross, just following up on that, is there a different protocol though for the firefighters when they're going into these places? I know, say, you know, for building inspectors, they like that nobody else is on site kind of thing, and I don't know whether that's the same for when your guys go in to inspect some of these places.
I am, yeah. We usually we'd have a program up and running, and it would be the firefighters doing it. It'd be called building familiarization and business audits. So that I've canceled for now because of those concerns, but prevention are still attending. They're wearing masks, and they're asking the owners to maybe stand to one side so they can maintain physical distancing with them when they're doing their inspections. But they've did prevention bureaus did a great job communicating with businesses. They touch base first, get a better time so we're not interrupting with any of the businesses business operations going on, and then make sure that there's limited amount of staff in the building at the time. So it's been positive. We haven't had a problem, and as I said, I'm very proud of the businesses in town and how they're maintaining and moving forward with this. They're not taking advantage of the fact that maybe we're not there as often as we could be.
Brian, I just want to look ahead maybe to Wednesday's SIC. Are we going to start to see the sort of the first round of recommendations from our economic recovery task force stuff?
Yes. So when we received the report on May 19, we asked that we referred it to staff for a preliminary review. And what I'm hoping and that we'll see on Wednesday is staff will come back and say, here's some immediate actions that can be implemented, and here's the cost of doing that, and here's some medium term, and then here's some longer term that will need a lot more work. Things like establishing the community foundation, looking at a community investment fund. So I'm hoping they'll come forward with sort of categories of recommendations in terms of when they can be adopted and what needs to be done to get them to the point where they're developed enough to be implemented.
I don't have any more questions. I'm not sure if Ian does.
No, I'm pretty much done. Other than Ross, you did have a fireworks call last night across the road.
Oh, right. Sorry,
We're not going to go down that
missed one. So,
here.
It wasn't on the weekend. I think his comment was we didn't have any fireworks calls on the weekend. So I think it was consistent.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the day and have a great weekend, and stay out of Sunset Park and keep distancing.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ross. Thanks.